for being here today. Robbie, Damlin, and Shiri Orion, who are here with us from the Parents Circle Families Forum, an organization, as I said just a few moments ago in our service, formed and developed and led by Israeli and Palestinian families who have lost close family members due to the conflict. And as I shared with you from the Bima, we had an exchange, our staff and the two of you in the last 10 or so days about whether or not this trip was still going to happen and whether or not it was right, if our community could handle this visit and this message. And I'm so grateful that we said yes, and I'm so grateful that you're here. And I know that in a time like this, as we're following the headlines and we're keeping track on friends and family who are in harm's way, it can be a time of hardening the heart and closing ourselves off to the total human experience that is front and center in this moment. And as I said just a few minutes ago, if there's anyone in the world who has every right to hate the other, it's you and your colleagues and the other families who are part of this organization, and yet, crucially, you've insisted that there's another way, that there's a different way. And that's the message that I hope and pray that will open our hearts and ourselves up to this afternoon as we listen to your stories, the crucial work of your organization, work that if there's any hope for a future for Israelis and Palestinians without violence, you all will help lead the way towards that future. So as we open our hearts to the message that you're going to share about the organization and the personal stories, and of course, what it means to hold these stories in this particular moment, we're grateful and we're here and we're listening.
Thank you, Rabbi. For those of you standing in the back, there's seats up front. There's two up here. There's some seats up here. Oh, you guys are so good at this already. Yes. Can you hear me better now? There you go. Thank you for welcoming us today. Thank you for opening up your community to us today. I don't say that lightly. Not all synagogues after October 7th kept their doors open to us. So I don't take it for granted that you did, and I don't take it for granted that all of you are here today at such a difficult moment for us. I don't exactly know what to say. I mean, under normal circumstances, I would tell you about the Parent Circle, Bereaved Israelis and Palestinians for Peace. I would tell you under normal circumstances that this is an organization made up of 700 bereaved Israeli and Palestinian families, all of whom have lost a loved one to the conflict, all of whom have chosen this path of reconciliation. I can stand. Have chosen a path of reconciliation rather than revenge. Under normal circumstances, I would list off all of our activities, all of our projects, the dialogue meetings that were, cruelly taken out of Israeli high schools by the Israeli government. I would tell you about our women's group, or more than 50 bereaved Israeli and Palestinian women who come together on a regular basis to amplify the voices of women and conflict resolution. I would tell you about our joint board. We have a joint Israeli and Palestinian board, about our summer camp. I would tell you about all of the miraculous things that we do on a day-to-day basis to bring Israelis and Palestinians together, to engage in dialogue, and to promote reconciliation. But these are anything but normal circumstances. Under normal circumstances, I would be introducing my colleague Laila Alsheikh, who is not here with us, together with Robbie Damlin, who can be here with us. Laila, unfortunately, she's a bereaved mother, a bereaved Palestinian mother. She lost her son. He was 6 months old when he was exposed to tear gas by the IDF, and he was not able to get timely medical attention. He was prevented from getting to the hospital. This happened many years ago in the West Bank. And Laila recently joined the parent circle after many years of not talking about her son's death. She lives in the West Bank. She has come all over the United States with us to share her story about why, even after all these years, she's chosen peace. You can come into the front. There's 2 seats up here. There's some seats up here. Come on in. If you have a seat open next to you, raise your hand. Come on in. There's 2 more seats up here. I was just telling everybody about Laila Alsheikh, who's our Palestinian member, a bereaved mother who couldn't be with us here today because the West Bank is sealed off. So there are no airports that she can get to. Usually she flies out of Tel Aviv, out of Ben Gurion Airport. Sometimes if she has to, she can fly out of Amman, but that is not possible. They cannot leave even their villages. So Laila sent something for me to read, and I will do that. I'll do that in a minute. When I was thinking about what I'm going to say now, because obviously since October 7th, normal circumstances don't exist. And I have a lot of questions. You know, I was born in the US to Israeli parents. I've been in youth movements and for peace my entire life. I've been working with progressive peace organizations in Israel and Palestine for the past 20 years. I've devoted a good portion of my life to the peace movement. And I believed in it, and I believe in it. And since October 7th, I have a lot of questions. I'm struggling with a lot of things. I'm guessing that many of you struggle as well. And yet, we held a vigil last Sunday online. Over 1,200 people registered for that vigil. That gives me hope. That lets me know that people still need us. And if somebody needs us, I'm going to show up. And so I'm hoping that by us showing up here today with you, that we can help with the healing, that we can help and we can be a part of a shared grief, not only a shared grief, but a shared hope. And when somebody asked us today, has your message changed? Has the message of the parent circle changed? It's not changed, but it is at its absolute most basic level, and that is we do not want any more bereaved families. We know, I'm not bereaved, but the members of the parent circle are bereaved. They know the cost of the conflict. They know the real price of the conflict, and they have been fighting for that pain that never goes away to not be a part of anyone else's narrative, neither Israeli nor Palestinian. We know about the sanctity of life, and that war is not going to preserve the sanctity of life. Only peace can do that. So I hope that we can bring you some of that today, and maybe some of the question marks will be answered. Before I start, I'd like us to take a moment's silence to remember all those that have lost a loved one, Palestinian and Israeli, since October 7th. Thank you. This is the message from Laila Alsheikh, bereaved Palestinian mother who could not be with us today. Hello, everyone. I hope my words find you all well. Usually when I speak, I tell my personal story, but this time I want to talk about the thousands of people who were killed in this war on both sides. I talk about the wounded and the missing, about the people who lost their homes. These people were not able to tell their stories, and perhaps they will not be able to do so. I am writing these words to you when my heart is sad and my mind cannot believe or understand what is happening. I know that some of you will say that this situation is not new. I know that, but in this war, everything is different and very horribly on both sides. I will not make comparisons of any kind. I will not blame anyone because both sides are losers in this war. All I want to say is that I hope this madness ends as soon as possible and with the least possible losses. God created us to live and to love each other. It is time to work more seriously to reach reconciliation and find a solution to this conflict. All the best. Thank you, Laila. Now I turn it over to you, my friend, Robbie Damlin, bereaved Israeli mother from Israel, lives in Yafo, and traveled not just many miles, but also many personal hurdles to be here at this time with us. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Rabbi.
Well, I don't actually, it's very unusual for me not to know what to say. But I spent the whole week arguing with myself if I should come or should I stay at home and be with my family and stay in my safe room and not, and listen to these terrible sirens. I've come to the conclusions that sometimes I'm more frightened of the sirens than I am of the bangs. And you get, I have an app on my phone, can you imagine, that plays a little bit of music to warn me that there's a siren and that there's a rocket over in my area. And it's a test of your belief system all the time. But I'm not Vivian Silva, who lived on Kibbutz Be'eri, and I'm not Vivian Silva, my dear, dear friend, who's been active the same amount of time as I have, and is now a hostage. I can't believe it. It started to rain. And I thought about Vivian. When they took her, she had probably a summer dress on. Has she got anything to wear? And how is it possible that this woman, who for all her life has been working for causes of peace, has been driving children from Gaza on road to recovery, has been doing the most extraordinary things and created women waging peace? How come? Where is the fairness in this? And then I think of Maoz Inon, who owns the Abraham Hostel. His parents were burnt to death in Neve Oz. And he spoke on the BBC this week and gave the message of the parent circle. And how many of these people who got killed are actually voters for the left and believe in peace? And so all of this goes around in your head all the time. And then you have a meeting with the Palestinian and the Israeli staff on the second day. It's so painful on Zoom because there is a parallel universe. Everybody sees the news through the eyes of their media. And so nobody knows exactly what's going on. And actually the atrocities took several days for people to really understand what happened. It is beyond any kind of belief. It is barbaric. And yet my friend Laila, actually, a rocket landed in her house. She lives near to her house. She lives in in Bethlehem, shot by the Hamas. It's all running around in my head, but I know what we're doing. What we're doing is the right thing. Because let me tell you, friends, there is the fear, the DNA of fear in the Jewish mind, which can very often create, this fear creates hatred, and the hatred creates violence. And we have to stop the cycle of violence. We have to. You know, when the army came to tell me that my son David had been killed by a Palestinian sniper, one of the first things that I said is, you can't kill anybody in the name of my child. And that was something that was almost prophetic about what I was going to do the rest of my life. And I almost very soon realized that one Palestinian killed my son, not the whole Palestinian nation. And please, what the Hamas does is not an indication of the whole Palestinian nation. Don't even go down that road. Don't think that there's any revenge that will ease the pain that we all feel. If there was a revenge, I promise you I would have done anything a very long time ago to bring David back. But that's not possible. So you make a choice. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? In many ways, when I think about it, I've had the most extraordinary life. You know what gratitude it is to be involved in the transformation of somebody's life from hatred and bloodshed to understanding that this is not the road to take, and that the sanctity of human life is more important than anything you can come up with. I know that it's very hard for all of you to even begin to think in terms of how can we see that sanctity of human life? How can we make a difference in our community? What should we be doing as Jews? Where is the DNA of the fear? What do we do with all of that? How can we make a difference now? I can tell you that every single one of you should write a letter to free the hostages. There are children and babies and people that an old man in a wheelchair aged 85 is a hostage. Can you believe it? If he's still alive, I don't know. But that isn't a cause for revenge. You're not helping by taking sides. You're not helping by not recognizing the occupation, by not recognizing that people have been kept in prison for so many years without freedom of movement. You know that the whole of the West Bank now is completely closed off. There's a closure. They can't come out. And the settlers have decided that this is the right time to take revenge and do whatever they like. And they have killed something like 60-something people. Just think about that, and there is no accountability. You know, we talk about the atrocities that happened, but also think about Huwara, that village that the settlers went and burnt people in their homes. We can't go down the road of comparison of suffering. We really can't. But we have to find a way to talk to each other. I'm not sure. There needs to be a long period now of quiet. This will end. This will end. I don't know how. I don't know. I'm so scared of all the retribution that will happen when the soldiers go in to Gaza. How many more mothers like me will there be? I know in my heart that we are going to form a group of women to talk to the mothers. Listen, to be a mother in Gaza, can you imagine what that is like now? Can you imagine what it's like to drag your children to the other end of the country without water, without food, and nowhere to go? There's no shelter. Imagine that. Imagine what it's like for a mother who lives in Sderot or in Ashkelon or in one of the villages nearby to Gaza. I heard a story on the radio of a mother who had 3 children in Sderot, and she had to find a way to get into the shelter. She had 15 seconds to get to the shelter, but she has one child in a wheelchair, and she didn't know what to do. Think about these things, you know, think about what happens as a result of this madness. And please, don't look at the Palestinian nation as Hamas. Don't look at the Israeli nation only as the settlers. For I tell you that the settlers are doing the cruelest things that are possible, and they are not accountable. They are not accountable. And so I chose in my own life, after David was killed, David was a student at Tel Aviv University, and he was studying for his master's in the philosophy of education. And he was part of the peace movement. And he was the head of all the student uprising. Can't imagine where he got that from. And when he was called to go to Miluim, to the reserves, he phoned me and came to talk to me and said, I don't know what to do. If I don't go, what will happen to my students? He was teaching philosophy to kids who were going to be inducted into the army very soon after. And if I don't go, what will happen to my soldiers? Because he was the officer. But if I do go, I will treat people with dignity, and so will all my soldiers. And here it comes. Do we know who the person is behind the gun? I think not. And he was killed by a Palestinian sniper, and I remember Itzhak Frankenthal, a religious Jewish man, came to talk to me. He heard me talking at a demonstration in Tel Aviv to end the occupation, but I also said there that we cannot do this alone. We have to have a Palestinian partner. And he persuaded me to go away for a weekend to East Jerusalem to meet other Palestinian and Israeli bereaved families. And I remember sitting around the table and looking into the eyes of the Palestinian mothers, and I realized by looking at them that together we could be the most incredible force, because if we could stand on a stage and talk in the same voice, then surely that would be an example to others. We are the least likely people. And by the way, I think that the Parent Circle is probably the only organization that exists in the world that works during a conflict. Can you imagine how painful the conversations are between us now? But that means that you trust each other, that we continue to work. We had a meeting with the alumni. We do a program of parallel narratives. I'm not going to go into that, but we have close to 2,000 alumni, Palestinian and Israeli. And the idea was to bring first unilaterally so people could say what was on their heart, and then have it together with the Palestinians. And that is another indication. If people are still willing to come and talk, then surely that should be an example to all of you. Please don't cut yourself off from this conflict. It's like, I know the pain. I know what you feel like, because I feel like that. I'm not sure, I don't know what to say. My heart is so sad, but I can't give up. Thank you.
Robbie,
If you've got difficult questions, ask Shuri.
when your beautiful son David was murdered, and you responded by saying, "You may not kill anybody in the name of my child." And you have built a lifetime of fidelity to that promise. I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for living the truth of that moment each and every day and bringing others into that truth. Your organization you have a video on your website, and when I started to watch it, my first thought was, oh, this is a promotional video. This is the kind of video that organizations put out to try to recruit support for their organization. And the video is a minute and a half of Israelis and Palestinians saying in Hebrew and in Arabic, "Anachnu lo rotzim etchem." We don't want you. And it took me a moment of hearing that again and again and again in Hebrew and Arabic to understand this isn't a promotional video asking for the support of the organization. This is the core message. We don't want any more bereaved parents. We need to figure out how to create a society, a vision of a shared future, a vision of the realities, the facts of the realities of an Israeli and a Palestinian society intertwined with one another that learns how to treat each other in a way that doesn't add to your organization. I want to say also, I'm sorry for the losses you've experienced right now, the Idnon family, and for Vivian, who's held hostage. And I pray that she's returned in safety and without harm, and that you get to hug your friend again and return to doing the work that you've been doing with her for many, many decades. Robbie, you spoke a little bit just now about what is being said right now amongst Israelis and Palestinians. Shiri, you mentioned the vigil of just a couple of days ago, where the hope of the number of people who came up to see each other and to recognize each other's pain. And I think one of the many challenges of this moment is the default to abstraction or generalization. And you've warned us of some of those. All Palestinians are. All Israelis are. All American Jews must believe X. These abstractions, these generalizations, are both harmful in the ideas that they put forward, which we know have consequences. Ideas have real-world ramifications. And they remove us from the human stories and the actual people, the beating hearts with dreams and families and futures imagined, which is unraveled in these moments. And it occurs to me that part of the need and the power of your work is to take us away from the abstractions and away from the generalizations into the particular, into the voices, into the experiences, into the eyes of those who nothing about this is abstract. And so I'm wondering if you can share, either from the experience of the work you did processing David's death and the writing that you did in the aftermath of that, or if you want to take it into the more current moment, perhaps some of the dialogue, some of the voices that are being exchanged between Palestinians and Israelis right now in real time in the vigil or in the other conversations that you're having.
I think I want to tell about Laila. This is what I do to the media. They ask me a question and I answer what I want to say.
Bechavod.
I've been doing this for a long time because since last Saturday, I think I must have done maybe 30 to 40 interviews all over the world to journalists. And I really wanted to talk about Laila because she's not here. And I need to be her voice because her voice of transformation is also quite incredible. We went to do a meeting in Jerusalem maybe, 4 or 5 months ago. And because we told our story, and there were people from Combatants for Peace were also there. And it's your friend, Chen. And he told the story of when he was an officer in the army, he didn't allow a car with 6 children in who were sick to come through the checkpoint. And then Laila, who also couldn't come through the checkpoint with her baby, burst into tears because it was also very close to where she lived. And of course, it wasn't the same incident, but it was a very similar incident. And she was weeping. And I said, come. And I took her and Chen outside. And they started to talk. And he said, Laila, I'm really sorry, but I actually had to tell you the story. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be honest. Today, he's one of the creators of Combatants for Peace. He's an extraordinary man. But I had to tell you the story because if I didn't, it would have been dishonest. And she said, I can forgive you because you told me the truth. If I had found that out and I didn't know you and I knew you, I would never forgive you. Forgiving is a really interesting concept. What does that mean? You know, one of the things that happened with David, I wanted to know what, well, you spoke about the letter, blah, blah. There's lots of that I can talk to tomorrow morning, but I won't, mind you. It's about what is forgiving, you know? What does that mean? You have to ask yourself that question because it's a very interesting variety that you get from people when you say, what do you mean when you forgive? And we went, I wrote a letter to the family of the man who killed David because I told them about David, I told them about the parent circle, that we are more than 700 families, and that we see as a vision in long term to create a framework for a reconciliation process to be an integral part of any political future peace agreement. Because we signed all kinds of stuff, haven't we? And all it is really is a ceasefire until the next time. And I told them that we needed to meet. Much of this you probably will have discovered by now that I have an extremely dominant South African accent. And that is because I was born in South Africa and very much influenced by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and being in the anti-apartheid movement. And so I said to the parents, we need to meet. We owe this to our grandchildren and children. And of course, I'm not the most patient character in the Middle East. I imagine that I will get an answer within days. It took 3 years, and I got an answer to say that I'm crazy. You see, I don't say mad anymore. Good. Why? Because this is the nuance of languages. Remember about languages, because if I say mad to you, it means angry, maybe. Crazy is majnoon, you know, a little bit off. And that I should stay away. Sorry. Stops here. I had a feeling. I don't know where it came from. Excuse me?
Tomorrow might be someone's birthday who is wearing pink, and so we've arranged for a little surprise. This is Robbie's very good, mine and Robbie's very good friend, Todd Detheridge, who leads a very important organization called Telos. And we are very, very lucky to have him here with us.
And he took us to New Orleans.
And he likes to eat good food. I told you we were going to have a birthday surprise for you.
Anyway, I can't. Whew. So I have no idea. What was I saying?
You wrote a letter to the
Okay,
sniper.
so I expected to get, like the next day. But of course it took 3 years, and this man wrote me back and said I am crazy and that I should stay away from his family, and that he killed 10 people to free Palestine. And here comes the lesson of restorative justice. What does that mean? If you understand why somebody does it, it doesn't mean that it's okay. But what it does mean is it opens a door to conversation. Because when he was a little boy, he saw his uncle violently killed by the Israeli army. And then he lost 2 uncles in the second uprising. Now consider, if you grew up in Gaza, this is hard to say, and I want you to listen to this with your heart. If you grew up as a little boy in Gaza or a little girl, and you actually have no freedom of movement, and since you were a tiny child, you had bombs dropped without a shelter, right? This is not condoning anything. Okay, so what comes out of that? What are we doing to our children, and what is the aim now of this organization? We have to get to talk. We have to introduce the Sderot to Gaza. How impossible that is going to be, I don't know. But it's part of what we have to be doing, because this will go on and each generation becomes worse. It's like the settlers. Each generation of settlers becomes more violent than its parents. That's the abused syndrome. And so please, I ask you, I'm just going to say one thing, because now I'm so happy to see Todd, that if anybody has any questions, please do that. And I thank you for opening and for listening and for caring.
Amen. So, Robbie, we're gonna take a few questions so that we can get you and Todd, so that you can answer whatever you want to answer. So know that, questioners, whatever you ask, but also so that you can get to your birthday surprise and give and receive another hug. But we have time for a few questions, and Elise will come around with a microphone. If you're comfortable using it, please do speak into the microphone, because we also have community and friends listening in virtually, and that helps. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for coming. I know that you've been attacked by the present government who's prevented you from meeting. What are you doing now as an organization to try to engage despite the opposition of this relatively fascist government?
So I'll give Robbie a little break. She deserves one. It's a great question. Like 2 weeks ago, I would have planted you there.
I actually asked her beforehand to ask the question.
Did you? No. Oh. I wouldn't put it past you. So had this been 2 weeks ago, I would have told you, or I don't even know what date it is, but before October 7th, I would have told you about how the Israeli government had kicked us out of Israeli high schools. Our dialogue meeting program, which brings an Israeli and a Palestinian to speak in high schools. And for most Israeli high school students, it's the first time that they've met a Palestinian just as a human being, and have an opportunity to talk to them, and not by any coincidence right before they're going to the army. That meeting, that program was stopped, was targeted specifically by the Israeli government, and we were forbidden to go back in. More than 100 teachers and principals the very next day signed a letter saying, we want you in here. The protest movement every Saturday night asked us to give a dialogue meeting. What is the Israeli government so afraid of? how can this be? How can people like Robbie or people like Bassam Aramin, who lost his 10-year-old daughter and spent time in Israeli prison and is now talking about peace, why is that so dangerous? What is the Israeli government so afraid of? And we are fighting that. We were in the midst of fighting that in a heavy judicial process and in the media. All that is now on pause. We will have to go back into Israeli schools. Look, there's going to be a lot of work to do. This is a setback in many ways. The crack in people's psyche that is so small and difficult to get into under normal circumstances is now sealed shut. So there's a lot of healing work to be done. There's a lot of recovery. There's a lot of repair. And we're going to have to forge a new way forward. So we know what we still believe in. The path of how you get there isn't as clear as it was a few weeks ago, but we still know where we're going. We still have our compass.
The summer camp.
What about it?
They try to stop that.
You go ahead.
Yes?
Go ahead, tell about Tomer.
It's very interesting because nobody knows actually what's going to happen with the government. I have hopes that it will not be around for long. But they tried also to stop our summer camp. Can you imagine kids aged 14 to 18, 50 kids? I had 2 grandchildren there, and one is a really spoiled brat. He's been to London and all over, and Harry Potter and all this stuff. His grandmother schlepped him there. But he came to the summer camp. He did this after the ceremony that we do every year on Memorial Day. And he got very inspired. So he came to the summer camp with my granddaughter, who's a facilitator there. And he said, you know what, Safdush, this is the best week I've ever spent in my life. Isn't that extraordinary? And it shows you that from not knowing each other at all, they are now in contact all the time, and there's going to be a program that will go on throughout the year. And these same kids on the 21st of September came to the United Nations in Jerusalem and signed a charter of nonviolence and of reconciliation. There is hope.
There's a question here.
Elise.
Thank you. You started to answer what I've been dying to ask you, which is about the education of children. So you've had this camp, you were working in Israeli high schools. Was there a parallel program in Gaza or the West Bank? And are there programs targeting younger children who might not have that locked in mindset yet? And I guess, how do you get back to that place where you can do these educational programs in both schools?
Me? A lot of our work is youth programming. The kind of national narratives that people are exposed to on both sides happens at the earliest, the youngest of ages. So we have to combat that. The dialogue meeting program was one of our strongest programs to be able to reach kids. The youngest kids that we probably work with are about 14. It's a really tricky change of psyche that we're asking people to make. It's a big leap. They've heard this narrative over and over and over again. And around high school years is when people say, hey, I don't have to believe everything that I've been told my entire life. I don't have to believe that every Palestinian wants to kill us. So that's the time. We can also work with the teachers. We do a lot of work with teachers to prepare the classroom beforehand and so that they can work with the kids afterwards, right? This is like a big mind jump for a lot of people. What do you mean, they don't all hate us? What do you mean, like, those two, Israeli and Palestinians, can be friends and know each other? The summer camp is also part of youth programming. A lot of the work we do is around narratives and sharing of narratives. Your personal narrative, how has it affected you? People like Robbie, but also anybody is about their own narratives, about your national narrative. What does it mean to have a history that includes the Holocaust? What does it mean to have a history that includes the Nakba, or the catastrophe? And also looking at people's, political narratives. What does it mean to be associated with the peace movement? What is it, and your historical narrative? What does 67 mean to an Israeli, and what does it mean to a Palestinian? That's a program called the Parallel Narrative Experience, and we've been running that for, more than 10 years. We have an active alumni group of more than 2,000 people. But now the focus really has to be inside the house. We have to work on our staff. Bringing Israelis and Palestinians together under normal circumstances and working as a joint organization is not easy. They have to face normalization. We have to face being called traitors. When I say we, I'm an Israeli and American. I don't think I told you about my work here in the United States, though. I run the American Friends of the Parent Circle. So I'm based in the US, and I run our American Friends organization. You all have information you should have. If you don't, I have more about the work that we do here. The majority of the work that we do here is to bring the messages either in person when we're lucky enough, or virtually to speak to audiences and change people's minds one heart at a time. We're also here to raise funds for the organization. We are the largest funder of the Parent Circle. Since the Trump administration had all of the USAID funding cut off to Parent Circle, we are now in the process of just getting that funding reinstated. But since then, the American Friends of the organization, and we have some great supporters here today with us, we're very fortunate, have been the biggest donor to the Parent Circle. And, in all of this time that I've been dealing with my own questions and my own sadness and my own grief, I have to ask myself, and I ask you too, what can we do for them? How can we be supporting them? Even though it's really hard right now, and even though we might not have energy, that I feel like that is the question. What's our responsibility right now? What can we do to support these fearless people? They are really at the front lines of the conflict right now. And the front lines of people saying in this very, in this difficult time where you can't say anything but us versus them, they are saying something different. On Israeli news right now, there's a little logo, and it says, "We will win together, nenatzech beyachad." And I keep asking myself, what does that mean? What does winning look like to you? And there is no winning. Like Laila said, we are all losers in this. So please, ask yourselves, I have to ask myself too, how are we going to support Laila? How are we going to support Robbie? What can we do in our little lives to make that possible?
I think we're going to have time for one more question. I want to thank you, Shiri, for that invitation. Helplessness has been one of the dominant emotional experiences of the last 2 weeks. And the two of you have offered us ways to move through helplessness, right? It's not a one-size solution. It's not fixing everything all at once, but supporting the work that you're doing is a way to move from helplessness into action. And Robbie, as you said, writing letters to have the hostages freed immediately to our Congress people. These are actions that we can take in a time in which it feels like there's nothing to do, and yet there is what to do. Let's take one more question. Sylvia.
So first, I just want to, I want to share some information that my friend Janet just shared with me, which is that there is a vigil rally tomorrow in front of the Israeli consulate where the message will be at 11 a.m., where the message will be to free the hostages. So there is an action that folks can take. Thank you for being here. I wanted to ask you to help me process something that I'm struggling with, and you started to talk about it a little bit. I'm hearing language trying to distinguish, thinking about October 7th, between providing context versus justification. And I'm wondering if you could help me distinguish between those two.
There's no justification. There cannot be justification for any violence. There can't be justification for what the Hamas did. Nowhere. They can understand why. That's something different. It doesn't mean, it's like on a personal level when I understood that the man who killed David, why he did it. It's not that I condoned it, but it's that I understood why. And if you are interested in restorative justice, which for me is a very important part of my life, that's the way to open up a conversation is through restorative justice. You don't have to agree. It's actually all about having enough empathy to listen to somebody you don't agree with and allow them to talk, because we don't do that generally, including me. I've got a tongue like a viper if I want. But it doesn't do anything, it just closes everybody down. It's very difficult to know now. It's so raw. This is one of the reasons I was so scared to come here. Who the hell am I to come here and tell you guys how to feel? I only know how I feel, and I understand that from afar. It seems so impossible, this whole thing, that you have to take a side. One of the biggest problems that we have is that people take sides. I'm pro-Israeli, I'm pro-Palestinian. You then import our conflict into your country and create hatred between Jews and Muslims. Look what's happening on your campuses now. I had a feeling that we must organize now a campus tour with 2 of the younger members of our group so that they come. Because it's quite extraordinary how this message works. It's not a local message, it's an internet. I remember we went to Milwaukee. It was bloody cold. We went to Milwaukee and the Jewish students hadn't spoken to the Muslim students at all. There was a huge problem on the campus. And I was there with Bassam, and after we spoke, they came to talk to each other for the first time. That's not the universal panacea. What it is the beginning. And somebody then has to work with them. Because half of these kids, I promise you, they couldn't find Palestine on a map. And now everything is terribly raw. But I think if we had something like a campus tour like that, it could alleviate some of the problems. I remember doing a talk in Columbia University. You see, I told you can't shut me up.
No desire to, no desire to.
In Columbia University, and the Jewish students sat on one side and the Muslims on the other. Firstly, everybody said, don't go. So I said, why not? I want to go. That's exactly where I should be. And so I sat on the stage, and all the Jewish students had like computers, they're waiting for me to say something wrong. And so I said, no, you could see, it was in the air. So then I said to him, look, why don't you take all your belief system, take all your religion, take all the things you think you know about Israel and Palestine and put it on the chair next to you and let's talk to the heart. And it worked. It's not, of course, ongoing unless there's somebody who takes it from me and works with that group. But you'd be amazed how people can have that emotional breakthrough and recognize the pain in the other through the story, which is most of what we do anyway.
Thank you, Robbie and Shiri, so much for being here. I'll say to you, Tzetchem b'shalom, bo'achem b'shalom. May you go in peace, and may you return to our community in peace. So Rabbi Brous had told me that after you came, something like 10 years ago, to our community, that she said to you, every time you're in LA, you have a seat at our table and amongst our community. And so when you come back, please come visit us. Please continue to inspire us with this message of hope and peace and nonviolence that you shared today. I wanna bless you as well. These words are written in Tehillim and Psalms about God. Right, but God doesn't have hands. We do. We are God's hands. It says in Tehillim about God that God is that God is the healer of broken hearts, and God binds our wounds one at a time. That's the work that you all are doing. You're bringing healing to the broken heart, and you're binding wounds one at a time. It's sacred work. It's God work. May you be blessed as you continue to do that work. May the work of your hands bring about the peace we all yearn for. Shabbat shalom.